Welcome. Welcome to the online worship service here at First Jefferson Unitarian Universalist Church in Fort Worth, Texas. My name is Reverend Dr. Aija Duelm, and I'm delighted to return here today as your guest speaker. I am glad you are joining us for worship. Our liberal faith calls us to engage the world and our neighbor with love and care. The world needs our care, our talents, our passions, our commitment to justice and dignity of each being. And we need one another to make it through our journeys. So we gather here for worship to remind ourselves of who we are and how we want to live. We gather here to stay connected to our dreams of love and justice. So let us begin by centering ourselves as your talented minister of music, pianist Misha Beresnev, plays the prelude. For our call to worship today is written by Heidi Cotton, This Faith. Let us be a faith that gathers, reaching for one another through the walls of hate others build, through the cages of ignorance and arrogance, and through the fear that burns city streets. Let us be a faith that sees a vision of a better world, more compassionate, more just, more holy, and with more love. There is a faith that binds up the broken, cauterizes battle wounds with the balm of peace, sings louder and louder than the trumpets of war. Let us be that faith too. Let us be the ones who do not tread lightly in this world, but light it up with our love, who hold up the mirror of worth and dignity, who are the sanctuary others seek. But first, let us be a faith that worships together here this morning in this space, at this moment, let us be of faith. Please join in our opening hymn, Love Will Guide Us. Our song leader today is Dan Levine.
Love will guide us, peace has tried us, hope inside us will lead the way on the road from greed to giving. Love will guide us through the hard night. If you cannot sing like angels, if you cannot speak before thousands, you can give from deep within you. You can change the world with your love. Love will guide us. Peace has tried us. Hope inside us will lead the way on the road from greed to giving. Love will guide us through the hard night.
We begin our time together by lighting our chalice, the symbol of our liberal faith. And today's chalice lighting reading is called The Pride Flame by Linda Lee Franson. We light this flame to ignite our hearts and minds, that spark of knowledge that enlightens, the shimmering hope that burns, the blazing love that engulfs our actions, the bonfire of our commitment. We light this flame for those who celebrate themselves, who fear, who hope, who persevere, who stand on the side of love for all. We light this flame for those who have been ridiculed, that they may find peace. For those who have fought to marry, that they may celebrate. For those who live in uncertainty in the world, that they may have hope. We light this flame to renew our commitment that no one shall ever again suffer for the right to love. We light this flame to celebrate our kaleidoscope of diversity, working, loving, and living on the side of love. For this, we light this flame. June is Pride Month. We celebrate the diversity among us in terms of sexual orientation and gender diversity. We not only acknowledge this kind of diversity among us, but we lift it up as beautiful and sacred. And we extend our love, urging everyone to gather on the side of love. Let us take a moment to reflect on this particular time in your life, in the lives of your family, friends, neighbors, community, and consider these questions. What does it mean to truly love your neighbor? Where do you see that kind of love in your life? who has loved you? Which of your neighbors needs your love today? Who needs you to choose love? And what is the call of love to you today? I invite you to share your experiences with one another to stay connected and as part of the exploration of spiritual journeys. And now, let us ground ourselves in the covenant of this community. Please join me in reminding ourselves of the promise that we give to each other. Love is the doctrine of this church. The quest of truth is our sacrament, and service is our prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge in freedom, to serve others in community to the end that all souls shall grow into harmony with creation. Thus do we covenant with one another. Today's story for all ages is the story about a rabbit named Aija. This story was written by Arthur Duelm. Aija lived in a lovely hutch in a farm country. On the other side of the fence lived Kobo, who unfortunately was not as well off as his neighbor Aija. But whatever Kobo had was good enough for him. They both went to their fields to work. Aija's garden soil was very fertile and brought in great harvest. Unfortunately, Kobo's ground was not so fertile, and no matter how hard he worked, Kobo managed to grow only enough to get by. One day, Aija went looking in his barn for an axe to cut down an overgrown bush. When he opened his toolbox, he found his hammer, his screwdriver, his nails, his pliers, but his axe was not anywhere to be found. It was gone. Aija thought for a second. I know where that axe is, he said. Since Aija had a suspicious nature, he was certain that Kobo had taken his axe. Of course, he had no proof of it, but nevertheless, he was certain that his neighbor was a thief. As Aija worked, he looked across the field to spy on his neighbor. Whenever he saw Kobo, he became more convinced that he was right. That rabbit has a look of a thief, Aija muttered. He hops like a thief. He holds his head like a thief, and his hands. Hello, Aija, Kobo called him. Aija grumbled a reply and said to himself, he even talks like a thief. All summer long, Aija watched Kobo and grew angrier and angrier. The days grew shorter, winter came, and then the winter snow melted, and it was spring, the season to work the field again. Aija took a shovel from his toolbox to till the soil. Still no axe, he muttered. While digging, Aija felt the blade of his shovel strike something hard. Bending over, he saw a bit of steel sticking up from the soil. It was his axe. Aija suddenly remembered that he had left the axe in the field the year before. He had rushed into his house when a terrible rainstorm struck, and the storm must have buried the axe in the muddy soil. "Hi, Aija," Kobo called from across the way. Aija looked at his neighbor and thought, "My, how he has changed." It was a funny thing, but Kobo no longer looked like a thief to Aija. His paws didn't look as if they were ready to snatch something that didn't belong to him. Now, Aija's neighbor appeared no different than any other rabbit. He hopped like a good rabbit. He spoke decently, too. Aija returned to his hutch, relieved to have such an honest neighbor. The reading for today comes from James Baldwin's work, The Fire Next Time. Love takes off the masks that we fear we cannot live without and know we cannot live within. I use the word love here not merely in the personal sense, but as a state of being or a state of grace. Not in the infantile American sense of being made happy, but in the tough and universal sense of quest and daring and growth. It is good to have honest neighbors. It is great to have good neighbors. I have good neighbors. They watch our house when we leave for a vacation or family visit. And I might be a weird one, but I do like to know my neighbors. When I first arrived in the United States, I stayed at another Latvian woman's house. And within the first month, I had met her neighbors. Her parents had bought the house in the 50s, and yet she had not gotten to know her neighbors until I arrived. Now, during the pandemic, one of her neighbors has been going shopping for her and been checking in on her throughout this time. It is good to have good neighbors. How many of your neighbors do you know? What about the neighbors at work, at the grocery store, the ones you see on the news? What do you think of all your neighbors? Are they good and honest? Or is there something from Aija in all of us that sometimes leads us to see our neighbor, near or far, as somehow bad? And then everything we see about that person only reinforces our thinking. I wonder who here has not judged our neighbor, well, even a little bit, by the way they take care or do not take care of their front lawn. Whether they leave stuff around and how much stuff they leave around. Whether they fix up the fences or clean out the overgrown bushes or care for their pets. Sometimes we judge our neighbor, or we know someone who does judge their neighbor, based on the color of their skin, or because of who they love, or what clothes they wear. We may judge them based on the language they use, and I think for us, particularly if they use such words of worship and God. And then there are times we're not willing to go deeper in relationship with these neighbors because we have already prejudged the other and closed ourselves off for anything deeper, to the point that we are no longer inclusive and welcoming. Some of our biases and judgments that we carry, we may have inherited from our parents or from media that seeks to tell us what is normal and what we should look like and what we should hate. These judgments do not allow us to see how good our neighbor truly is. Some of our own hurts may have made us fearful of the other, and then we exclude the other because of our own profound desire not to be judged, but to be seen as we are. And in our reading today, James Baldwin says that religion, too, shapes our judgments and sometimes moves us away from love. In his biographical novel, Fire Next Time, and by the way, you can add this to your reading list if you haven't read it already, Baldwin discusses how religion that he dearly loved, teaches love for those who believe and hate for all others. Baldwin wrote a lot on race issues. He was a remarkable civil rights advocate, and he was enthusiastic about religion. He became a preacher and wrote intense sermons. However, while preaching, he began to question and examine the life which he lived. And he realized that even the church was corrupt, that the Bible was full with discrepancies, that the Christianity he was part of taught love, but it was a racist love. You see, Baldwin believed that an encounter with love should lead to love for others. But what he saw was increased fear and distrust of outsiders. So he argues that a shift is needed, a shift from hatred to love in the religion. This makes me wonder about our faith and its call to love. How are we doing? Where in our faith we need to shift from hate to love? Is this UU Church teaching you to love Christians in all religious language, even when this is not your spirituality? Is this UU Church helping you to work toward being anti-racist instead of teaching you a racist love? Is this UU Church embracing people of diverse sexual orientations and gender identities to be a truly welcoming community? There is plenty of hatred in the world. Let us be that faith that shifts from hatred to love. To love that allows us to see our neighbor fully and allow ourselves to take off the masks. Well, not the pandemic ones, even though we sure are eager not to wear these masks any longer than necessary. And many already have taken the masks off. Baldwin talks about masks that we wear to cover our true selves out of fear, out of precaution, in hopes not to be judged by the other. Love takes off these masks. It takes away fear and allows one to be who they are without any judgment. This love is not about making an individual happy, like the ones we see in the movies where the hero is being helplessly in love as if love is something passive. Baldwin is calling for love in the tough and universal sense of quest and daring and growth. For love that is not passive, but active, requiring our choice and our actions. This is the kind of love that allows us to be who we are. Beautiful, wonderful, lovable, and loving. Loving of all our neighbors in ways that honor the dignity and worth of their being, in ways that allow them to take off their masks and be their authentic selves. We need more of this kind of love. The world needs more of this kind of love. We will pause here to hold one another in care and support. We pause to extend our love to one another, knowing that our daily lives bring us joys and concerns, and sometimes pain and sorrow as well. And today, we are sharing with Miss Opal Lee. Each year, Miss Opal Lee, who's 94 years old, walks from Fort Worth to Washington, D.C. in an effort to get Juneteenth named as a national holiday. She will be beginning her walk this year on Saturday, and that is this coming Saturday, June 19th. And she will walk 2.5 miles from the south side of Fort Worth to the Tarrant County Courthouse. And First Jefferson is supporting this effort by walking those first miles with her. And we can participate in a number of ways. By walking with her, by driving in a caravan behind the walk, or by making a donation to help Miss Opal on her journey. Please join with us in this celebration of Juneteenth. The walk will start at 11 a.m. at 1050 Evans Avenue in Fort Worth. Donations can be made using the PayPal link on the church website or by check. And please mark those check donations and all donations by using phrases walk or Juneteenth. And there's additional information coming on Facebook. So let us take a moment to pray, to meditate, or practice silence, whichever is your preferred spiritual practice. If you feel comfortable, you may close your eyes or let them rest. Breathe with me. Following the words of Rise William, we pray and ask the Spirit of life come to us to break down barriers, to widen horizons, to make us less judgmental. Help us to see the larger picture and the kinder conclusion, to love and let live, to embrace and forgive, to sustain and care. Help us to reach out to our better selves, that we may love more and hate less, care more and reject less, that bound together by understanding we may sustain each other through trial and tribulation, through joy and happiness, through sickness and health. Help us be joined in a common purpose of hope and fulfillment as we seek common holy ground for one and all. And to this, we add the silent prayers of our hearts. Continue.
There is more love somewhere. There is more love somewhere. I'm gonna keep on till I find it. There is more love somewhere. until I find it. There is more joy somewhere.
James Baldwin was unique during his time, as he was one of two black gay men who were out at that time. The other one was Bayard Rustin. Baldwin referred to himself as out and proud before the term was popular. And his work reflects intersections of civil rights and LGBTQ plus rights. He wrote on same-sex relationships, even though he had limited language at the time to describe all the diversity that we know today. Baldwin saw that people's attitudes don't change because law changes. And love has nothing to do with law or church. One falls in love with whom one falls in love for, and no law or church can change that. Amen to that. We celebrate with pride this month various sexual orientations, people with various sexual orientations and gender identities that live among us. Possibly some of us went to Dallas Pride Parade to join in solidarity with others in honoring the dignity of people. We remember the Stonewall riots, sacrifices and struggles of generations that have opened up possibilities for many who fought for marriage equality, for LGBTQ people to have opportunities to use their gifts and talents in public offices and ministries. We remember the rallies where people of many faiths, including ours, gathered in Massachusetts in 2004 to request fully inclusive marriage, and then to keep the marriage equality law and block Proposition 8 in California in 2008. This was the time when Reverend Jason Shelton wrote Standing on the Side of Love song. And then later, the campaign by the same name was born in response to the tragic shootings in our sister congregation, the Tennessee Valley Unitarian Universalist Church in Knoxville, Tennessee. A shooting took place on July 27, 2008. An anonymous writer recalls that Jim David Atkinson walked into the church sanctuary during the performance of a children's musical and began firing a shotgun, killing 2 and injuring 6. And among the fatalities were members of this church as well as of another congregation called Westside Unitarian Universalist Church in Knoxville. And later, in a letter that was found by police, Atkinson had said that he targeted the church because of its liberal values, including its openness to gays and lesbians, claiming that such openness is somehow anti-American. However, after the shooting, both Knoxville congregations pledged to remain open and welcoming and, in fact, choose to embrace their inclusive and loving spirit even more boldly in the days that followed. They were supported by the wider community and many religious neighbors. The two congregations drew on their Unitarian Universalist principles, which consistently urge us to choose love over hate and fear. Because there is still lots of hate and fear around us. And the inequalities and struggles that LGBTQ plus community continue to face have nothing really to do with marriage equality. Coming out is still a thing, and not everywhere people are safe to be their authentic selves. The rights of LGBTQ community are still under attack. Earlier this year, I came across news from my country, from Latvia. It is part of European Union, which has set certain guidelines for each its member countries to ensure that people's rights are honored. And these include recognition of LGBTQ marriages. In Latvia, the evangelical conservative religious groups created an attacking campaign against this guideline, even calling for a statewide referendum to assert that the country has the right to their own opinion, which in their mind consists of their limited opinion that does not provide space for people's rights. This attacking rhetoric fueled the rise of hatred. At the end of April, a 29-year-old gay man was set on fire and suffered 85% burns. He was a paramedic and worked tirelessly to help people during COVID pandemic, and yet his homophobic neighbor set him on fire. His partner also suffered burns as he was trying to douse the flames, but this man died 5 days after the arson attack. Here in the U.S., hate crimes are on the rise too. Hate crimes committed based on person's sexual orientation is the third largest category after race and religion. And this year, the number has already reached 17% of all hate crimes. Last year was the year of record number of violent and fatal incidents against or attacks against transgender people. Total of 44 people died. And this year, already 27 transgender and gender non-conforming people have died in these attacks. Yet, FBI's hate crime definition is rather narrow, and many are targeted in ways that fall outside this definition. For example, here in Texas, this legislative session has been the most brutal one for LGBTQ plus people. The first anti-LGBTQ bill was filed on the very first day of bill filing, and thereafter more than 30 anti-LGBTQ bills were filed, including 13 bills that directly attacked trans youth. These are bills that rely on misinformation and lies, and for more than 6 months, Texas families have had to worry about bills that seek to dictate private medical decisions, classify parents as child abusers for providing gender-affirming care, and have their kids singled out as too different to participate in sports. There is a political advocacy group called Equality Texas, which focuses its efforts in fighting for LGBTQ rights in our legislative avenues. Their efforts have helped gather enough voices that all of the 30-plus bills are now dead. Yay. Unfortunately, my yay is rather hushed because there is still a possibility that some of the bills can come up during the special summer session. We cannot take a break, but have to stay awake and be ready to move into action as part of our commitment to side with love. And while the bills did not pass, they still caused significant harm. Fear-mongering about the lives of trans people only fuels bias and discrimination. Transgender, non-binary, gender non-conforming students are already at greater risk in school, and the threats from lawmakers have only made it worse. The Equality Texas had partnered with Texas Psychological Association to provide counseling for $1 throughout the session. We do need a shift from hate to love. Our faith urges us to side with love that is a choice, our choice, love that is deep and life-changing. Love that reminds each one of us that you are lovable and you are called to be a good neighbor, to choose the side of love and to answer its call every time. Will you join me in answering this call? I invite you to join in our closing hymn, and the hymn is called Answering the Call of Love. And I want to make a note here that the original title of the song was Standing on the Side of Love. However, in 2017, the resolution at GA heard the calls of those who cannot stand and changed the language to be more inclusive. So we sing Answering the Call of Love.
The promise of the Spirit, faith, hope, and love abide. And so every soul is blessed and made whole. The truth in our hearts is our guide. We are answering the call of love. Hands joined together as hearts beat as one. Emboldened by faith, we dare to proclaim we are answering the call of love. Sometimes we build a barrier to keep love tightly bound. Reflections of grace in every embrace, fulfilling the vision divine. We are answering the call of love. Hands joined together as hearts beat as one. Emboldened by faith, we dare to proclaim we are answering the call of love. A bright new day is dawning, when love will not divide. Reflections of grace in every embrace, fulfilling the vision divine. We are answering the call of love. Hands joined together as hearts beat as one. Emboldened truth and by faith we dare to proclaim. We are answering the call of love. We are answering the call of love.
We extinguish the chalice. As we extinguish it, we now know that it is with us, to continue to carry with us its call to walk the path of justice, to speak words of love, and fill the world with compassion. As we go forth, I offer you a benediction written by George Brooks. May the love that gives to life its beauty, the reverence that gives to life its sacredness, and the purposes that give to life its deep significance be strong within each of us and lead us into ever-deepening relationships with all of life. Amen.